I left Fort Smith with one suitcase. I came back a different person. Someone in my professional network sent me here about a year ago. She said, just read for a while, you will understand why. She was right. I have been meaning to share mine ever since, so here it is. Hi, my name is Melissa. I'm 32 years old. I live in Dallas in a two-bedroom condo with good light and a balcony I actually use. I have a group of friends I genuinely like. I go on real dates with people who have their lives together. I work in forensic accounting at a firm that recruited me. I make good money. I sleep well. I'm telling you all of that first because this story starts somewhere that looks nothing like that, and I want you to be able to see the distance. I grew up in Fort Smith, Arkansas. If you don't know it, that's fine. It's a real city with real people, and some of them are doing just fine. But it is also a place where, if you are not careful, the ceiling is very low, and nobody tells you it doesn't have to be. My parents, Donna and Gary, were not bad people. My mother worked checkout at a grocery store for 20 years. My father did HVAC repair, mostly residential, mostly cash jobs for people he knew. They worked hard. They were tired. They loved us in the way people love things they don't quite know how to take care of, with good intentions and not enough tools. I had two siblings. My brother Kyle was 3 years older than me. My sister Amber was 2 years younger. We grew up in a house on a street where most of the houses looked the same. Vinyl siding, chain link fence, a yard that got mowed when it got embarrassing. Money in our house was not a topic. It was a weather system. Some weeks are fine. Some weeks my mother would get quiet in a specific way, and my father would make a lot of phone calls, and things would get tense for a few days and then loosen up again. Nobody explained it. It just moved through the house like a change in pressure, and we all adjusted without being told to. I was around 10 when I started paying attention to the actual numbers. Not because anyone asked me to, because I was curious, and because something felt off and I wanted to understand what it was. I started noticing things. My father got paid on Fridays. By Tuesday, the bank account my mother checked on her phone was always lower than it should have been based on what came in. The electric bill was always late, even though the money to pay it had been there 2 weeks earlier. The car payment would get skipped one month and doubled the next. There was always something squeaking loudest that got the grease while three other things went quiet and waited. I didn't have words for it yet, but I could see that the problem wasn't the amount coming in, it was what happened to it after. The thinking around it, or the lack of thinking. The way money moved through my parents' hands because nobody was watching where it went. I wrote things down. Lists, mostly. Questions I didn't have answers to. I had a list of words I didn't know the meaning of that I looked up at school. I had a list of things I wanted to understand better. The Fort Smith Public Library became mine the summer I turned 13. I rode my bike there 3 mornings a week. I started pulling books off shelves and reading the backs of them, biographies mostly at first. What I found, slowly, was that the people in those books had used tools my family didn't know existed. Scholarships, grants, free tutoring, programs designed for people without money who wanted to go somewhere. My parents had never mentioned any of these things, not because they were hiding them, because they didn't know. Nobody in my family, going back as far as I could trace, had ever needed to know. I started making my own map. I wrote down every resource I found. Free tutoring at the school, available to any student who asked, the library's online learning portal, YouTube, which even back then had people uploading tutorials on everything from math concepts to how to write a professional email. I wrote all of it down, and then I started using it. I did not know how to study. Wanting to learn something is not the same as knowing how to make it stick. I found a video online that explained study techniques like they were life skills: spaced repetition, active recall, writing things down by hand to make them stick. I started doing that with my actual schoolwork. My grades went from average to good within one semester. My English teacher, Mrs. Calloway, pulled me aside and asked what changed. I told her I had learned how to study. She looked at me for a moment and said, "Keep doing that." By high school, I had found more tools. Khan Academy had launched, and I used it constantly to fill in the gaps I had in math from years of just getting by. A site called Coursera that offered free classes from actual universities was just starting up around the time I was finishing high school, and I bookmarked it immediately. I knew I was going to need it. At 16, I started making money. I had been reading about freelancing online for over a year, and a platform called Fiverr had just launched. I made an account and listed myself as a proofreader and editor, charging a few dollars per job. My first month, I made $22. I wrote down the amount. By 17, I was making $60 to $90 a month doing proofreading, editing, and writing simple product descriptions. I opened a savings account at a local bank with my mother's cosign and deposited every dollar. That account was mine. I didn't spend a dollar of it. Junior year, I found out that the University of Arkansas had a strong accounting program with merit scholarships. I made a list of every scholarship I was eligible for. I applied for 11 of them before Thanksgiving of my senior year. I wrote every essay myself and had Mrs. Calloway review them. My mother thought it was nice that I was looking at college. My father thought I should look at the community college in Fort Smith and stay close. Kyle told me college was expensive and that I should think carefully, which was his way of saying he didn't understand why I would go. He was not being unkind. He genuinely could not picture it. Amber was 15. She asked me what I was going to study. I said, accounting. I was interested in the financial side. She scrunched her nose and said, that sounds like you. It was the most accurate thing anyone in my family had ever said to me. I got into the University of Arkansas in Fayetteville with a partial merit scholarship. Combined with a Pell Grant, it covered just over half my costs. I accepted without hesitating. I left Fort Smith that August with one suitcase, my notes, and $3,800 in my savings account. My mother cried at the car. My father shook my hand. Kyle said to call if I needed anything. Amber hugged me for a long time and whispered, "Don't forget to tell me everything." I drove away and felt the thing I had been waiting years to feel, like I was finally moving in the right direction. Fayetteville was 45 minutes from Fort Smith and felt like a different country. I majored in accounting. I kept my grades strong. I went to every professor's office hours at least once per semester. I introduced myself. I asked questions. I was not the loudest person in any room, but I was always prepared and I was always there. I also kept working. I registered on a job platform for odd jobs the week I turned 18 and started picking up weekend work immediately. Furniture assembly, yard work, moving help. Between that and continued freelance work, I was making between $700 and $1,000 a month outside of class by sophomore year. My roommate sophomore year was a woman named Priya, who was studying data analytics. She was organized in a way that made me feel like an amateur. I watched her for about 3 weeks and then asked if she would show me her system. She looked pleased to be asked. I took notes, I adapted what worked, and left what didn't. Priya is still one of my closest friends. She now works in data science at a tech company in Austin, and we see each other 4 or 5 times a year. It was in my junior year that I found the direction I had been circling without knowing it. I was taking a fraud examination elective, a course most accounting students skipped because it was not required, and something clicked in a way that nothing had quite clicked before. The professor talked about financial records the way a detective talks about a crime scene. Every number told a story. The gap between what the record showed and what had actually happened was something you could find and prove. I thought about my father's bank account, the pattern I had been watching since I was 10, the money that arrived on Fridays and disappeared by Tuesday without a clear explanation. I had been doing a version of this my whole life without knowing there was a name for it or a career built around it. After class, I went straight to the library and sat down with a notepad. Forensic accounting. I wrote it at the top of a fresh page. Underneath it, I wrote the word that I had been writing under things since I was 13. How? I graduated from the University of Arkansas with a degree in accounting and a strong grade point average.
I had passed two parts of the CPA exam before graduation and finished the remaining sections the following year while working. That first job was at a regional accounting firm in Little Rock, $61,000, a clear path toward forensic work within 2 to 3 years. 2 years in, my supervisor told me that a forensic accounting group in Dallas was looking for junior associates and that my name had come up. She asked if I was interested. I went home that night and opened a fresh page. I wrote Dallas at the top. Underneath it, I wrote how. I moved to Dallas at 25 with a job offer, a CPA license, and a savings account with $18,000 in it. Dallas was enormous and fast and completely indifferent to where I had come from, which was exactly what I needed. Nobody in Dallas cared that I was from Fort Smith. Dallas only wanted to know what you could do. I could do quite a lot. I joined a forensic accounting team at a mid-sized financial advisory firm. My job was to analyze financial records for signs of fraud, embezzlement, and financial misrepresentation. Every case was a puzzle. Every set of numbers told a story if you knew how to read it. I had been reading between the lines my whole life. I just have never had a professional framework for it before. My manager, Claire, who had been in forensic accounting for 15 years, told me after my first year that I had unusually good instincts for pattern recognition. I thanked her. She said, "I'm not complimenting you. I'm telling you to lean into it."
I leaned into it. I also built a life, deliberately, the way I had built everything else. I joined a young professionals network. I said yes to invitations even when I was tired. I found a farmer's market I liked. I found a gym I actually enjoyed. I found a group of women through a hiking meetup, and 3 of them became real friends. I started dating with the same intentionality I brought to everything else. I knew what I wanted. I knew what I would not accept. I was in no hurry. I had a life I liked, and I was not interested in shrinking it for the wrong person. I decorated my place slowly and with care. Mostly thrifted and vintage pieces I refinished myself, a hobby I had picked up from a video series online, but it looked exactly like me, warm and ordered and full of light. I was happy, not in a loud way, in a quiet, solid, this is mine kind of way. 18 months in, I was promoted to senior analyst. A year after that, forensic accounting manager, leading a team of 4, $96,000 a year, maxing out my retirement account, 6 months of expenses and savings, credit score 810. I bought my condo at 30, 2 bedrooms, a balcony. I closed on a Friday in April and stood in the empty living room that evening with a fullness in my chest I had no words for. The woman who was supposed to have a plan for her life watched everyone around her have one and decided to build her own. From Fridays that drained by Tuesday, from a library on a summer morning, from a notepad with a word at the top and a question underneath it. All of it mine. I went back to Fort Smith for Christmas when I was 28. My parents' house looked smaller than I remembered. The carpet was the same carpet. The television was larger, but it was in the same spot. My father asked about my job for approximately 4 minutes before moving on to something he had seen on the news. He simply did not have a frame of reference for what I did. I might as well have told him I was a marine biologist. Kyle was there. He had started his own HVAC business, which was genuinely good news, and I told him so. He asked how Dallas was. I told him it was good. He said, "I could never live somewhere that big." I understood. He said, "Doesn't it feel fake?" I thought about that for a moment. I said no. He looked unconvinced. He was not wrong that it was different from Fort Smith. He just couldn't see that different was the whole point. Amber was 26. The second night I was there, she knocked on the door of my old room, where I was sitting with my laptop. She sat on the edge of the bed and said, "Can I ask you something?" She asked me how I had known what to do, how I had figured out the steps. I told her the truth. I said I hadn't known. I had just started writing down questions and looking up the answers, one at a time. I told her about the library.
about the free courses online, about learning how to actually study instead of just showing up. I told her the path was not something you found laid out in front of you. You built it one step at a time as you went. She asked about the medical billing work she was already doing and whether there was a path forward in it. I looked it up right there. Certified professional biller. She could do it online, a few months of study, a reasonable exam fee. It would make her more valuable immediately and open doors toward medical coding and health information management. She wrote it down in her phone notes. I sent her a link to a study resource the week I got back to Dallas. She said, "Thanks." We text occasionally. She seems to be moving, slowly, in a direction that has more options in it. Kyle is doing well on his own terms, and I mean that genuinely. His business is growing. He just never looked up from Fort Smith long enough to wonder what else might be out there. That is his life to live. My parents are my parents. I call once a week. My mother tells me about the neighbors. My father tells me about whatever he has going in the garage. I tell them work is good and Dallas is good. They tell me to eat more. It is its own kind of peace. I am 32 years old. I manage a forensic accounting team in one of the biggest financial markets in the country. I own my home. I have a life I chose deliberately and built carefully. I still keep notes. On my laptop, on sticky notes, in the margins of reports. The habit never left because it was never about the notes. It was about paying attention, asking why, writing it down so you can look at it clearly instead of letting it stay blurry. The best revenge isn't a confrontation. It's the life you build on the rubble of what didn't work. You leave, not in anger, just in the clear-eyed knowledge that the life you want is somewhere else, and that somewhere else is waiting for you to show up. And when you go back and the people there look at you like you're someone they used to know but can no longer quite place, that is not a sad thing. That is the whole point. You became someone they don't recognize because you became someone they never imagined, and you did it entirely on your own terms. There's a fresh page in my notes right now. Blank. There is still a lot I want to figure out. I am in no hurry, but I am already writing things down.